Ladies and gentlemen, we present at this time the regular Sunday afternoon address of Father Charles E. Coughlin from Royal Oak, Michigan. After you listen to the address by Father Coughlin, you're invited to write your comments to WHBI, Newark, New Jersey.
Ladies and gentlemen, once more it is my privilege to present to you Father Charles E. Coughlin from the Shrine of the Little Flower at Royal Oak, Michigan. He will speak to you this afternoon on a subject pertinent to persecution and communism. As you know, this hour is in no sense a donated hour. It is paid for at full commercial rates. This is your hour. This is your presentation. As long as you desire to have Father Coughlin a guest in your home each Sunday afternoon over these same stations, and at this same hour, he will be glad to speak fearlessly and courageously to you as he presents a message of Christianity and Americanism to Catholic and Protestant and religious Jew. Many thousands in this audience will desire to obtain a copy of this afternoon's address. Copies of this address can be had by writing directly to Father Coughlin at Royal Oak, Michigan. Pictures of certain documents to which Father Coughlin is about to refer can also be had by all those writing in for a copy of this week's broadcast. Transcribed and directed by Mr. Emil Cote of New York, the Little Flower choristers with Mr. Cyril Gutherell at the organ before me will sing for you the Advent hymn, Come, O Come, Emmanuel. During the singing of this hymn, please phone some friend or family to listen in to this broadcast, which will be of outstanding interest to every American. Immediately following, Father Coughlin will come to the microphone. And now may I present to you Father Coughlin.
Good afternoon, my friends. By way of introduction, and before I deliver the address prepared for this afternoon, I have this following announcement to make. Following last Sunday's discourse, a local newspaper said, quotations, "It is obvious that Father Coughlin either does not know what the word interview means, or is giving still further evidence of his congenital inability to tell the truth," unquote. These printed remarks were occasioned by a statement which I incorporated in last Sunday's address relative to the alleged Henry Ford Rabbi Franklin interview, an interview which was printed locally in Detroit. I was not present at this interview. It was reported to me in a statement signed by Mr. Harry Bennett of the Ford Motor Corporation, and which I read last Sunday, and which will be reproduced over Mr. Bennett's signature in Social Justice magazine next week. Because news reports printed last Monday tended to discredit the statement, I secured a second signed statement from Mr. Harry Bennett of the Ford Motor Corporation last Monday afternoon. It reads as follows: Dearborn, Michigan, December 5th, 1938. Quotations. A statement which resulted in casting reflections of an exceedingly serious nature upon the veracity of Father Coughlin appeared in the Detroit Free Press Monday, December 5th, 1938, based upon a statement which it was alleged I made. It labeled statements of Father Coughlin regarding Rabbi Franklin's recent visit to the Ford offices for the purpose of getting an expression of the Jewish situation in Germany as untrue. This is to definitely state that absolutely no interview was given in response to Rabbi Franklin's request by Mr. Ford to be printed as Mr. Ford's own statement in the press, but merely agreed with certain written expressions, and the statement given by Father Coughlin on December 4th, 1938, was an absolutely correct verbatim report of a statement having my own approval and signature, signed Harry H. Bennett, December 5th, 1938, unquote. I make this announcement to set at ease the minds of this radio audience and to let it be known that in preparing my broadcasts, I rest my assertions upon documentary evidence. Because the newspapers and news services saw fit not to publish the photostatic copies of the two original signed statements, which I handed to them last Monday afternoon following my visit to the Ford Motor Corporation, I shall have them printed in Social Justice magazine next week in order to complete the record. It is my hope that this announcement concludes a local issue as far as I am concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, last week a representative of the Jewish Community Council of Detroit sought to obtain adequate radio facilities to be used in broadcasting an official Jewish answer to my 3 previous addresses. Recognizing that this gentleman was confronted with many mechanical difficulties in obtaining a clearance of a full hour over a large group of radio stations, and upon such short notice, I conveyed to him through Mr. Leo Fitzpatrick an invitation for the General Jewish Council, a national body to which the local Jewish Council is affiliated, an invitation to use the facilities of my network on this hour and at my expense. The General Jewish Council has declined the invitation. However, over most of these stations, and at its own expense, the General Jewish Council will address this audience sometime later today. Their spokesman will not be a Jewish gentleman. He will be the Catholic attorney, Mr. Frank Hogan of Washington, District of Columbia. I wish to impress upon this audience that Mr. Hogan is speaking for the General Jewish Council, to which is affiliated all the local Jewish community councils of America. I take this opportunity to invite my audience to listen attentively to this Catholic spokesman as he pleads the case, shall I say of the Jews, or shall I say of the General Jewish Council and the local Jewish community council. This attorney's address, about to be delivered under the auspices of the General Jewish Council, will be better appreciated following the discourse which I am about to deliver, because I will deal pertinently with certain activities, constitutional activities, of the Jewish community councils which are related to the General Jewish Council. My friends, It is appropriate for me to re-express the thoughts which were woven in bold colors throughout the last 3 discourses. They are these. I hold no animosity towards the Jews. I distinguish most carefully between good Jews and bad Jews, as well as I do between the good Gentiles and bad Gentiles. I sincerely sympathize with the millions of humble religious Jews, both in America and elsewhere, who have been persecuted by a thoughtless world, a world which does not always distinguish between the good Jews and the bad Jews, a world which lashes at the pillar of persecution the innocent Jews for the misdemeanors of the guilty Jews. Openly and fearlessly do I admit that my main contention is with the atheistic Jew and Gentile, the communistic Jew and Gentile, who have been responsible and will continue to be responsible in great part both for the discriminations and the persecutions inflicted upon the Jews as a body. To prevent happening in America what has happened elsewhere, and to end once and for all the hostility of German Nazism towards Jews, I ask my fellow citizens not only to oppose Nazism, an effect of communism, but to fight manfully against communism itself. I further appeal to them to apply the basic principle of science in their common effort to destroy persecution. The basic principle which teaches us that in order to remove effects permanently, the causes which produce them must be removed first. And finally, I reminded both Jew and Gentile that ours is not a problem of anti-Semitism. Ours is a problem of anti-communism. Thus, the issue is clear. The Jews of America cannot afford to be identified with communism or with communistic activities. They are asked to disassociate themselves from the atheistic Jews who espouse communism. Therefore, every person worthy of the name of Christian stands prepared to oppose the excesses of Nazism, stands prepared to extend the right hand of sympathy towards the persecuted Jews in Germany. But every intelligent American Christian whose heart bleeds for his 20 million fellow Christians who were butchered by the Trotskys and Belakuns, the Bronsteins and the Cohens in Soviet Russia, in the Ukraine, in Hungary, and elsewhere, they appeal to the Jews of America to join with them in removing communism, the cause of Nazism. They appeal particularly to the eminent sons of Jewry who have risen so high in government, in journalism, in banking, in broadcasting, and in motion pictures, to launch an effective, determined campaign against the Red Menace, which has baptized the hillsides and valleys of Europe with the blood of 20 million Christian martyrs. The best answer that Jewry can give me or America is not a passionate denial that Jews, far beyond their proportion of population, are not interested in furthering communism. Official action will speak more eloquently than 10,000 denials. In asking the Gentiles of America to oppose the Gentiles of the Nazi Party in Germany, Jews are not seeking anything that is unreasonable. On the other hand, when the Gentiles of America ask the Jews in this country to oppose the Jews in Russia, in Spain, and elsewhere, who are supporting communism to our detriment and to the detriment of the Christians living abroad, we are asking nothing unreasonable. Oh, there comes a time in the life of every individual as well as in the life of every nation when righteousness and justice must take precedence over the bonds of race and blood. Tolerance then becomes a heinous vice when it tolerates the theology of atheism, the patriotism of internationalism, and the justice of religious persecution. No matter then what ties of blood and common parentage bind the God-fearing Jews in New York with the atheistic Jews in Moscow, those ties must be severed for God, for country, and for the preservation of the teeming masses of Jews in America who have been victimized by the silence of their leaders and the propaganda of the press. Everyone recognizes that Soviet Russia has made anti-Semitism a crime. The entire world recognizes that Soviet Russia has made pro-Christianity, pro-theism, and pro-religion likewise crimes. Everyone recognizes the predominance of atheistic Jews in the pattern of Russian communism. Evidence is so overwhelming to substantiate this statement that it is idle for any informed person to attempt disputing it. On this point, let me quote for you from an article by James E. Abbey, which appeared in the New Outlook in February 1934. It says, Comrade Smirdovich, the Red Pope, an atheist, is the official restrainer and regulator of religion in the USSR. He is a member of the important Central Executive Committee. As the official Antichrist of the Soviet republics, he decides how far the remaining priests of the church may go towards preaching the word of God. Kindly, cultured, educated, tolerant in manner, Smirdovich says religion will die out when divorced from superstitious ritual, pomp, and fear. His job is to help kill it. Men of the Red Army sing as they march, continues this article. Over 1 million of these sons are under arms in Russia today, and millions are in reserve. More millions are being born than starve. He or those who control the Red Army control Russia, a force to be reckoned with. But the men who control Russia are not Russians. They are not Slavs. Stalin is a Georgian, a different race. Kaganovich is a Jew. Litvinov is a Jew. Karakan, Armenian. Smirdovich, who controls and destroys religion, is a Jew. Orjonikidze is Georgian. Kurtz is Austrian. Karl Radik, a Jew. Men in business for Russia in strategic positions, buyers and traders, are rarely ever Russian. Members of the Jewish race from all over the world predominate. Every member of the Foreign Office Press Censor Bureau is a Jew. Little men of Russia who help in responsible positions, heads of offices, trusts, are mostly Jews, unquote the article. Further unfortunate evidence of atheistic Jews dominating the destinies of communists in Hungary is also presented. From an official government document which I have before me, and a picture of which will be reproduced in Social Justice magazine, we learn of the close relationship existing between atheistic Jews and communism. In Hungary, under the atheistic Jew Bela Kun, Aaron Cohen, apostate Jews dominated communism with its mass murder of more than 20,000 Christians in a period of 130 days of horror. Out of 11 department heads in the Hungarian Communist cabinet, 9 were Jews. Out of 30 total members, there were 20 Jews. And the departments of the Interior, Finance, Education, Foreign Relations, War, Food and Supplies were 100% manned by Jews. My friends, I refer to these records for one purpose only, for it is my desire as a non-Jew to tell you, my fellow Jewish citizens, to tell you the truth, to inform you what thoughts millions of persons are entertaining. In Europe particularly, Jews in great numbers have been identified with the communist movement, with communist slaughter and Christian persecution. But which one of you will uphold the activities of these men, these Lunashevskis and Belakuns and Trotskys? None of you religious Jews who love your God, none of you intelligent Jews whose minds are too well developed to be captivated by the false philosophy of tolerance, tolerance towards atheism, tolerance towards mass murder, tolerance towards the progenitor of Nazism. Oh, the hour has struck when neither Jew nor Gentile in America can afford to be associated with communism, even through the medium of silence. I am giving voice to a sentiment which is expressed in millions of homes and in thousands of gatherings. Thus, for his collective safety, the American Jew must repudiate the atheistic Jew. Communism must be stamped out, else an illogical world will build up a defense mechanism against it in these United States, paralleling, if not surpassing, the same illogical defense mechanism which operates under Nazism. Ladies and gentlemen, there are millions of innocent Americans who do not grasp the essential meaning of communism. They are inclined to believe that only he is a communist who carries in his pocket a card proving that he has paid his dues to some communist organization. A card does not make a man a communist any more than a baptismal certificate makes a man a saint. The thoughts which a man entertains, the policy which he pursues, these are the internal causes which generate communists, and these causes are reduced in their final crystallization to the one word, atheism, and all it implies. Show me a man who disbelieves in God, and particularly who opposes the dissemination of knowledge concerning God, and I will show you an embryonic communist, one who, if he is logical, will soon stand beside Lunashkovsky and Smirdovich and their cohorts, determined to rid this world of all religion and supplant it with the doctrines of the Soviet. Show me a man whose policies completely ostracize God from our public institutions, and I will show you a person who indirectly is working hand in glove with the Belakuns, the Trotskys, the Stalins, and the Lenins. Any policy which pursues the course of secularizing our homes, our government, our public institutions, is a policy which logically leads to the adoption of the principles of communism with its resultant mass murder and economic chaos. On this point, my friends, do not be confused. Towards this godlessness which is imposed upon us through the so-called secularization of our public institutions, entertain no tolerance, any more than you would be tolerant towards our rattlesnake. For it is an insidious serpent which sooner or later will sting you to death if you caress it against your bosom. Having clarified that point, a point which is not disputed by any Christian or by any religious, God-fearing Jew, permit me to speak of its application in America. Permit me to refer to the General Jewish Council and the local Jewish community councils. At the outset, I graciously admit the contributions towards religion and culture accredited to Jews. I am not ignorant of the poems of David. I am no stranger to the saga lived by Moses and his contemporaries. Many precious hours have I spent in the companionship of the prophets of Israel. However, when the house of our civilization is wrapped in the lurid flames of destruction, this is not the time for idle eulogizing. When the house is on fire, its tenants are not apt to gather in the drawing room to be thrilled by its paintings and raptured by its sculpture, its poetry, its tomes of music, or its encyclopedia of science, which are there on exhibit. When the house is on fire, as is the house of our civilization today, we dispense with gratifying our vanities and call in the fire department to save our possessions, lest they be lost in the general conflagration. All about us the angry flames of communism, of godlessness, are devouring not only the contributions which Jewry has made to our generation, but also the benedictions which our Gentile ancestors have contributed towards our well-being. Behold, Russia is a shambles, China is a battlefield, France is a social chaos, Spain is a slaughterhouse, Mexico is a spiritual volcano, and even our own United States is beclouded with a crimson smoke which chokes our progress. We are concerned, then, with extinguishing this fire, before it consumes our inheritance, and before its flames of hatred enfold themselves around the millions of innocent Jews and Gentiles in a holocaust of persecution. American Jewry is also concerned with the welfare of the 3 million Jews resident in Russia. 3 million who, according to every valid report, now occupy many major places of prominence in the Soviet government, far beyond the proportion of their population. Well may American Jewry be concerned, for soon the pendulum of time will swing. Soon the 160 million Russians whose parents and relatives were massacred by the Trotskys and Lenins and Belakoons, soon they will break the shackles which bind them to poverty, to exploitation, and to slavery. What new chapter, then, will history write? God only knows. But this is certain. Russian Jewry will not be dealing with a Christian people, because the leaders of communism have robbed the Russian Christians of the doctrine of charity, Christ's doctrine. The Lunashevskys, the Litvinovs, and the commissars of the Kremlin have outlawed the Sermon on the Mount and pilloried to death the doctrine of brotherhood. Today, Stalin stands with his back against the wall, confronted by 160 million de-Christianized Russians who have been subjected to the preachments of hate, the gospel of blood, and the policy of revenge. All that is unfortunate. But blame not the forthcoming uprising in Russia upon Christians, whose churches have been closed and whose religion has been outlawed. Young Russia, new Russia, will be a barbaric Russia. The uprising of these Gentile barbarians, formed and fashioned as such by Smirovich and Lunashevsky, the haters of God and man, that uprising against these Jewish masters will be disastrous to the 3 million Jews, your co-nationals, my American Jews. I ask you, is it too late to come to their rescue? Is it too late to cease sending our congratulations to the murderers of Christians and destroyers of religion? Is it not opportune for you and for us, for Jew and for Christian, to demand of them a cessation of their persecution, of their godlessness, and save the lives of these 3 million and all? This afternoon, the General Jewish Council, which is the central body of the Jewish Community Councils, is about to answer my so-called anti-Semitism, which in reality is anti-communism. This General Jewish Council, which is composed of the American Jewish Committee, the American Jewish Congress, the B'nai B'rith, and the Jewish Labor Committee, and therefore to which all the local Jewish community councils are related, has chosen for its spokesman a distinguished gentleman of my own faith, a most prominent attorney, in whose veins there courses the same Irish blood which flows in mine. Nevertheless, he is the engaged spokesman of the American Jewish Council. Not to him do I address these remarks, but rather to the client whom he represents. Because I love my fellow Christians both abroad and at home, because I love my fellow Americans, be they Jew or Gentile, I will not be silent in the face of an impending disaster. nor will I still my voice in pleading for the elimination of all persecution, be it that of Nazism or of communism whence it sprang, or of the economic injustices which in turn advanced the Lenins and Trotskys and their atheistic breed to the pinnacles of power. Were I an enemy of Jewry, I would be silent. Were I anti-Semitic, I would bandage my eyes, refusing to view the realities of life, and let happen what will happen in America and Russia and elsewhere without protest. Therefore, using as my textbook the B'nai B'rith National Jewish Monthly Magazine for June 1938, a Cincinnati publication, let me prepare this audience for its reception of the General Jewish Council, to which is affiliated the Jewish Community Councils throughout America. For the information of all Christian Americans, Catholic and Protestant, let it be known on the authority of the B'nai B'rith National Monthly Magazine that Jewish community councils are generally composed of representatives of all the Jewish organizations of the city in which they are formed. The size of the Jewish community council reflects the type of community in which they exist, and they are comprised of from 7 to 165 Jewish organizations in some cities, with as many as 250 representatives. In the few short years of their existence, these councils have many accomplishments to their credit. They have brought together Jewish groups for joint action, Jewish groups which never before have met on a common footing. They have attracted into the orbit of active Jewish community life certain organizations which have in the past been detached from the center of Jewish group affairs. The authenticity of these statements is vouched for, I repeat, in the June 1938 edition of the B'nai B'rith National Jewish Monthly. This magazine informs us that in Cincinnati, for example, the local community council has representatives from 13 synagogues and temples, 11 Zionist and pro-Palestine groups, 6 local welfare agencies, 4 national hospital groups, representatives from the American Jewish Committee, the JDC, the B'nai B'rith, the Council of Jewish Women and its Junior Division, Friends of the Hebrew University, Jewish National Workers Alliance, and 11 other organizations. Over all the Jewish councils in America, there dominates the General Jewish Council, an organization, therefore, which more than any other Jewish organization speaks authoritatively for the Jews. In publishing the report of achievements accomplished by the Jewish community councils, we read on page 365 of the B'nai B'rith National Jewish Monthly for June 1938 the following astounding admission, quotations. In Bridgeport and Cleveland, the councils persuaded public school officials to stop Easter and Christmas practices which had been embarrassing to the Jewish children and had found serious objection among Jewish parents who had hesitated to deal with the matter individually, unquote. In referring to this remarkable quotation, the words I wish to emphasize are these: Christmas and Easter practices. By practices, I understand neither the teaching of religion, the reading and the interpretation of the Bible, nor the common recitation of prayers. These words, Christmas and Easter practices, connote for me in this connection the celebration of these two great holidays, the interchanging of gifts, the singing of Christmas carols, the innocent pageantry associated with the crib and the empty tomb. And in submitting this quotation, I do not wish to infer that the Jewish community councils are totally responsible for eliminating Christ or religion from our schools. I am glad to admit that this organization is within its constitutional rights. More than that, I admit that this action cannot by any stretch of the imagination be construed as intolerant or as intolerance. But I am not so illogical as to charge that the Jews alone have been responsible for banishing religion from our educational institutions. Many influences and policies originating from non-Jewish quarters have contributed their major share towards this unhappy condition. I am not so illogical as to charge that organized Jewry in America is opposed to the preachments and practices of Christianity within the walls of our churches or under the roof trees of our homes. But I am logical enough to comprehend and appreciate the truthfulness of Lenin's statement, "Give me a child for 3 years, and I will hand you back a communist." And I am Christian enough to assert that if God will remain expatriated from our schools, these public institutions will begin to contribute towards graduating a godless generation. In fairness both to the Jews and to my audience, let me repeat the use I am about to make of this quotation. I am restricting the words Easter and Christmas practices merely to the innocent celebrations in which our children participate immediately prior to the 2 great holidays, Christmas and Easter. Already the teaching of religion has been stricken from the curricula of nearly every public school. In many states, school authorities have seen fit to exclude even Bible reading. In this instance, I am concerned then with the passing of almost the last mention of Christ within our classrooms, where his birth, his death, and resurrection, great historical events that they were, even greater than the discovery of America and the signing of our Declaration of Independence, are no longer mentioned or celebrated in festal manner by our children. For this, all of us are to blame. All Christians, more than the Jews. In fact, the Jews are to be congratulated for succeeding in getting their policies practiced, especially when they are in the minority. But remembering that godlessness is the poison spring whence communism originates, remembering that this United States was founded by Christians, pioneered by Christians, and developed in great part by Christians, with no more than 4 million Jews claiming residence amongst our 130 million population, why do the local Jewish community councils cooperate with others in imposing their policies, their constitutional policies of opposition to Christmas and Easter practices? Why do they propagate that policy through the agency of law that is on their side? Why do they boast in their publications that they have sown seeds? What shall I call it? Seeds of godlessness. Were my advice of any value, I should counsel the Jews to refrain from joining with these others in adopting a program, ever so constitutional, mind you, which breeds resentment to their race. I find no fault with the Jewish councils for following out their constitutional rights. They ought to be praised for that. Perchance I find fault with them for their injudiciousness in attempting to live to the letter of the law. This action lends itself, therefore, to serious misinterpretation. It excites the spirit of intolerance amongst many citizens who misinterpret any assault against the story of Bethlehem and the tragedy of Calvary, even though it be constitutional, particularly if it comes from those who do not profess Christianity. Intolerance towards men is always reprehensible, but oftentimes intolerance is provoked by injudicious and erroneous policy. Therefore, I appeal to the General Jewish Council and to the local councils. I ask you, even though you are within your constitutional rights, even though we dare not protest legally, why have you closed the minds of our children constitutionally to the beautiful story of Bethlehem and the Messiah? Was not that an act of poor judgment? Why have you blotted out the cycle of the Easter story with its Pilate's Hall, its crucifixion and its glorious resurrection of the victim of mob violence and hate? Oh, we Christians, we have no constitutional regret. We should not even complain, because you are within your rights. You were within your rights. But I repeat, it appears that you are injudicious. Even if you Jews and Gentiles, in great number, consider that these are idle dreams and poetry, these affairs of the practices of Christmas and Easter, why not leave us with our dreams and poetry? Dreams and poetry that we learned at our mother's knee, dreams and poetry which were carried here by Columbus in a Santa Maria, dreams and poetry which were told by La Salle and Brebeuf and Lallemont to Tecumseh and the Indian children, dreams and poetry which motivated the Pilgrim Fathers to brave the elements of a hostile nature, dreams and poetry which brought the Huguenots to seek a refuge upon our shores, dreams and poetry which burned in the hearts of the Scotch Covenanters in the Virginias and Carolinas, dreams and poetry which both Catholics and Protestants regard not as dreams and poetry, but as the bread of truth and the wine of life. Oh, my fellow citizens, it was the dreams and poetry born in the crib of Bethlehem and spoken from the pulpit of the cross that made this country the land of the free and the home of the brave. Oh, how can the General Jewish Council and the Jewish Community Councils, who are about to answer me today through the lips of a fellow religionist and with the voice of a fellow descendant of the same Irish race which suffered death and persecution, how can they be so unkind to us, to organize with their admitted preeminence in banking, in press, in cinema, and in radio, and with the law on their side, to protest against the innocent practices of Christmas and Easter time? All the banking institutions can rob our Christian citizenry through the practice of usury. A controlled press can veil the eyes of a nation against the Christian blood which has run ankle-deep in Barcelona. Members of your race can devise reasons to exclude a voice from the airways which seeks to tell America the truth. And pitiless propaganda can exhibit itself upon the silver screens of our nation to deceive us. These things are not worthy of protest. They are negligible. Oh, but when constitutionally and legally you tell us in your official publication of instituting a successful program, to use your own words, of persuading the public school officials to stop Easter and Christmas practices which have been embarrassing to the Jewish children, then silence on my part is not right. I should speak to you and ask you, members of the Jewish councils, to be kinder towards us and not demand the letter of the law. My fellow Jews, please understand our Christian attitude towards all this. You are a minority, a small but powerful minority, and we are a majority, an easygoing, patient majority, not always conscious of our latent power. Sometimes we are a careless majority. The saintly Pope Pius X spoke of the heroism of Blessed Joan of Arc and contrasted it with the timidity of so many Catholics, particularly in our day. He said, in our time more than ever before, the chief strength of the wicked lies in the cowardice and weakness of good men. All the strength of Satan's reign is due to the easy-going weakness of Catholics. Yes, we are a democratic people also. But in our conception of democracy, Christmas and Easter were accepted as axiomatic truths by most of those who framed our Constitution, as axiomatic as the law of gravitation, which these founders troubled not to write into the document which safeguards our rights and our liberties. But that was a mistake. That was unfortunate for us. The acceptance of these truths of Christmas and Easter, I confess, is not so general today amongst all our Christians and citizens. However, in the hearts of those who have ceased practicing religion, or who regard it as a non-essential for the well-being of our national life, in their hearts there is a resentment towards any organized group which either directly or indirectly assails the ideals characterized by their mothers. My friends, when I quote for you the evidence of a program injudiciously but constitutionally designed by a minority group to cooperate with those who are aiming to complete the Christianization of America, I am presenting no novel program recently conceived either by the General Jewish Council or the Jewish Community Councils themselves. That program has been in our midst long before the General Jewish Councils were ever organized. However, I ask the religious Jews of America, and I believe you are in the majority, Jews who perhaps are not aware of this policy and program, I ask them to be kindly towards us. Russian communism was motivated by a man who swore he would drag God from his false heaven. Communism over the world is identified with this godlessness, this extinction of Christ and of God from the lives of men. Whether you are aware of it or not, this regrettable policy of godlessness is indelibly stamped with the hallmark of world communism. The words which I have spoken today are reaching Cleveland and Bridgeport and practically every other city in this nation where Christmas and Easter practices have been excluded from the public schools through the self-admitted agency of cooperative, constitutional Jewish activity. And I feel that the fine, intelligent, religious Jews of America will not persist in this instance in their constitutional right. With no rancor or resentment am I unveiling these thoughts today. I am simply protesting in the name of the inarticulate millions, protesting against those Jews and Gentiles who seek through intolerance to withhold from the children of this land the tender story of the Christ child and his glorious resurrection from the dead. Jews are not intolerant. No, I cannot believe that. My friends, Christians and religious Jews, I am motivated by a desire to strike courageously at all persecution. Let us therefore join together hand in hand to strike at the cause of all persecution, irreligion, godlessness, Christlessness. Jews of America, look back down the ages to the great traditions that are yours. Sounding high from the tops of Sinai spoke your God and my God to Moses. Carried down its slopes to the wanderers in the desert came Moses with the commandments which both of us revere. God is your God. God is my God. Why, therefore, shall you persist in your constitutional rights when we Christians revere our Christ as the second person of the most blessed Trinity? Why shall you persist? I know you will not. I know you will desist. Thus, when the spirit of Christmas is about to descend upon the entire world, I regret that I found occasion to remind this audience that the General Jewish Council responsible for disbarring not the Christian religion, not the preaching of the Bible, not the recitation of prayers, but the last vestiges of Christmas practices from our schools, that the General Jewish Council had engaged the services of a fellow Catholic to discuss my recent challenge. It was a challenge occasioned by a $400 million fine levied against 600,000 Jews, a challenge for Christians to protest against this and other Nazi persecutions of a minority people. But it is likewise the occasion for Christians to remind the Jews of their Trotskys, their Belikuns, and their Lunashatskys, and their commissars, who since 1917 until this present hour have been engaged not in levying fines against Christians, but in destroying them from the face of the earth. Consequently, I appeal to America, Jew and Gentile, to stand shoulder to shoulder against not only Nazism, but against communism whence it springs, and against godlessness and injustice which produced both of them. That is all I ask, and that is all I plead for. In conclusion, may I tell you that more than 1900 years ago, when at the first advent this world was looking towards the birth of Christ in the manger, there were 3 wise men from distant lands determined to leave their homes, their occupations, to follow the silver shining of a star that led them over the sands of a desert to the crib of Bethlehem. Where are the wise men today? The same silver star is shining brightly above. The same clarion call has gone forth to you and to me as once it did to Melchior and Balthazar and Caspar, the Gentiles from the east who came to kneel before their brother and their God. Always this invitation today in vain for those of us who hear it. Shall the beckoning of the star shine in darkness for those who glimpse it? All too long have you and I both held aloof from our Master and our Lord. Victimized by poverty, by exploitation and war and depression, and perhaps motivated by a desire to have that which is being taken from us. I ask you, Christians, to come, cross over to Bethlehem, kneel before the crib of your Christ this Christmas. Bring him the gift of your heart that will love him, of your mind that will first know him, and of your whole soul, your whole person that will serve him and bring him back to his place of honor among the governments and nations of men. And as a token for this, my friends, search out some little child and grant that you will treat that little child kindly, charitably, and justly this Christmas. Good afternoon. God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have just listened to Father Coughlin delivering one of the outstanding addresses of this year. May I repeat that you are welcome to a copy of this broadcast simply by writing a letter addressed to Father Charles E. Coughlin at Royal Oak, Michigan. Father Coughlin asks me to invite you to listen to Mr. Frank J. Hogan, whom the General Jewish Council to which is affiliated all the local Jewish community councils, engaged to be their spokesman in answering Father Coughlin. He will be heard over these stations at an hour to be announced immediately following this broadcast. Mr. Hogan's broadcast originates at station WOL, Washington, D.C. Next Sunday, Father Coughlin will resume his place before the microphone to deal further with this question of communism and persecution. Until next Sunday afternoon, this is your announcer, Franklin Mitchell, bidding you good afternoon.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've presented the